So the first project that we're going to work on is doing a little tote bag or a little mini purse, any kind of little bag that you can imagine. You can do this in any size that you want. It's all dependent on what size you draw your pattern piece. And I'm going to try to make this really simple because I know a lot of you don't have all the tools at home that we have here at the studio. You don't have L-square rulers. So I'm going to try to show you creative ways that you can do these projects at home, even if you don't have some of the special tools that we have here. If you have a sewing machine, scissors, hopefully pins, a seam ripper, and you have your fabric and thread, something to draw with. You don't have to have a special drawing tool, but if you just want to use even actually washable markers from home are great, because if you do make a mistake, you can wash it and it'll come right out. So Crayola washable markers, or just draw on the back of the fabric with a pencil, something like that, that's fine. So again, the first thing we're gonna do is a tote bag. I found a few scraps of fabric here. So I have this cat fabric here, this scrap, and then I have some polka dots here, and I have this blue striped fabric. So I decided that I'm gonna make the cats the outside of the bag, the polka dots, the inside of the bag, and the blue fabric will be my straps. So normally in the studio we would use an L-square ruler and a piece of chalk to draw our pieces, but in this case I'm going to imagine that I am at home and I don't have those tools with me. So if you just find a book, any size that you like, you could take that book and you can place it on top of your fabric, and then you can trace around the outside of the book, and that's going to give you your shape. So you're literally just going to take the book, as long as the book fits on the fabric, on all of your pieces, your outside fabric and your inside fabric, you'll be able to use that to cut your pieces out, to draw your pieces and cut them out. Okay, so we're going to start there with that and go from there. Okay, so once you have traced your pieces, you can see I folded the fabric in half here, like that, so that it's 2 layers of fabric. So the piece was twice as big, and then I folded it in half, which was big enough to fit my book on here. Okay, now remember, whatever size square or rectangle you draw, the actual bag will become a little bit smaller than that once you sew it. So make sure you find something that is appropriately sized, that once you get it sewn, it'll become the size that you want it to be. So I've done the same thing on this, again, folded it in half. I drew on the back side of the fabric my shape, okay? So once you've done that, then you're going to want to pin your pieces together. So just like we do here in the studio, doing this one-handed here, you're gonna pin your layers of fabric together to hold them together. Just a few pins, maybe 1 near each corner would be fine. And then you can go ahead and cut it out on the lines that you've drawn. Okay, so to draw the straps, I'm just going to use a simple straight ruler because I'm assuming probably a lot of you have something similar to this laying around the house. So you can kind of hold the fabric up and see about how long of a strap you want. Okay, so we want the strap to hang down on both sides, and you can kind of determine how long you want it to be. It could be 2 short little handles. We are going to make 2 straps, 1 for each side of the bag, so it could be 2 long straps that might go cross-body if you have a long piece of fabric, or it could be 2 shorter straps, and that's fine. Whatever size you want is fine. What I would do is I would take that straight ruler, and you're going to draw a straight line along the one edge. Okay. Then we slide the ruler down, and what you want to do is you want to make sure that when you're drawing, you connect, see how I connect the line there together, okay? Because if you just go to the end of the line over here, you might accidentally draw it crooked, like that. Okay, now that's obviously exaggerating it, but it's a little harder to get it to go straight if you just start at where you ended. So if you give yourself a little bit of overlap, like this, then you'll know that your line is going to continue straight out. Okay, so I'm going to just continue my line out until I've reached the desired length I want to go. Okay, so that looks good for me. And then what we want to do is we want to make the piece, the rectangle, 4 inches wide. Okay, so the way that you're going to do this, since you don't have an L-square ruler, is you're going to take the 4-inch mark here, and you're going to line up the 4-inch mark on the line that you've drawn, so that you can make some marks that are 4 inches away. So we keep lining up the 4 on this side and making marks 4 inches away like this. So we're just making marks the same distance apart all the way across the top. It's parallel to the line that we first drew, okay? So with these marks that are along the top up here, we can take the ruler and again, connect the dots basically, and draw a new line across the top, okay? And then you just want to connect the sides, the ends together, so that you have a whole rectangle. Okay. Okay, then we can take our pins and again put a few pins. Let's see, that one's dull. Put a few pins in there. And that just hold my corners together. Okay, and then you can go ahead and cut these out on the line. Don't worry about cutting this fast. Okay. Okay, and then we will remove the pins. Okay, so now we have all of our pieces. We have our 2 outside pieces, our 2 inside pieces, and our 2 straps. And that's all we need. And then I have a spool of thread to go, and we will be ready to start to make this bag. Okay, so I've gone ahead and cut out my pieces, both the outside fabric and the lining fabric, and I've removed my pins. Okay, so I have 2 layers for each of these. And then we're gonna move on to cutting out the straps. Now the straps are a little tricky because I don't think you'd find a book to trace that would be the correct size for the strap. But most people have either a tape measure or just a straight ruler at home. Even a fabric tape measure, an actual measuring tape that we use in sewing class. Some of you have some sewing kits with a tape measure, and you could use that to draw out this piece. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, keep in mind while you're watching this video to just pause whenever you need to work on a step, and then you can continue to play once you complete a certain step. That way you won't feel like you miss what I'm saying, okay? So just pause it whenever you need a chance to move on to the next step. So first we're going to work on sewing the outside of the bag, then we will be sewing the inside of the bag together. And I just want to show you, okay, when you're sewing the outside of the bag together, you're going to want to pin your pieces together. And remember, when we pin with the pin sticking out off the fabric to make it easy to pull the pin out off to the side. And what you're going to do is you're going to start up here in the top corner, and you're going to stitch a little bit. Then you're going to go backwards a little bit, and you're going to sew all the way down to this corner. And you're not going to sew all the way to the edge of the fabric. You're going to want to stop before you get to the end of the fabric so you have room to turn or pivot. Okay, and then so your needle will have to be down in the fabric when you lift up the presser foot to go the other way. So your machine at home might not have an automatic needle down button, so you're going to make sure you use the wheel on the side of the machine over here to bring the needle down for you. Okay, so then once you get here, you're going to turn and you go down to the opposite corner. Same thing, don't sew off the edge. You're going to stop before you get to the edge. Okay, so you have room to turn, and then you come up to the very top, and you're going to back stitch there as well. Remember, about 3 stitches backwards and then 3 stitches forward. Okay, and you're going to want to sew about 1/2 inch from the edge, like we do in class usually. Okay, so you should not be sewing super close to the edge of the fabric. Otherwise, the stitches are going to come out, or the fabric is going to fray and fall apart there. So make sure you're sewing far enough in so that it catches the fabric, and just stay consistent. Try to stay consistent from one piece to the other when you're sewing it so that they fit together, okay? Now I've already gone ahead and threaded my machine, but if you have not threaded your machine at home before, or you're having trouble or need some assistance, just have your parents reach out to me. I figured it wasn't worth showing you how to thread the machine because your machine will not be exactly the same at home. So I have it already threaded here and ready to go. So I'm going to start up here at the top corner, as I mentioned. I'm going to put the presser foot down first, and I am lining it up so that the fabric is along the edge of the presser foot, like that. Okay. Now, remember, my machine's, the needle is defaulted to the left side over here of the presser foot, okay? So that puts me a half of an inch away like that. But if your machine, if the needle is more in the middle, like this, okay? If yours is more in the middle, you might want to move your fabric over a little bit, like that, okay? And that's fine, okay? We just want to make sure that you're sewing far enough in, again, that the fabric isn't going to fall apart on you there. Okay, so I've gone back to my normal starting position, and I'm going to go ahead and sew here. So we're starting right up here at the top of the fabric. You can see the top of the fabric intersects up here close to where the needle is, and I am lining up on the edge over here. So I'm going to do about 3 stitches forward. Go one more there, and then backwards. Okay, and that locks in our stitches. I'm going to take that first pin out right now, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew along the edge here. Okay, we get close to a pin, we're going to stop, take that pin out. Okay, and again, we're not going to go all the way to the end, we're going to stop a little bit before we get to the end. And then what we do is when we turn, we lift the presser foot, turn the fabric to go the other way, and this is where you're going to check and see if it lines up correctly. Now I'm slightly off here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift up the presser foot, rotate it back, and I'm going to do one more stitch. I'm just going to use the wheel, the flywheel on the side of the machine to do it, and that way I make sure the needle's down and then I only do one stitch. Lift up the presser foot, turn your fabric to go the other way, presser foot back down. And while you're sewing, you just want to make sure that your edges of your fabric are staying lined up. So the pins are going to help with that, but you also want to be looking out for it. Go one more there. So I'm going to sew all the way up to the top of the fabric here, and then I backstitch 3 stitches, okay, and then I go forward until I get to the end, okay. Bring my needle up in the air, bring the presser foot up in the air, pull the fabric out, and cut off the tail of thread. Okay, remember you always want to leave a long tail of thread on the machine so that you don't lose the thread through the needle when you start sewing again. So don't cut your threads up here like this, always bring them off to the side and cut off on the side. Okay, and then the threads should be under the foot and tucked to the back when you're ready to go again on the next side. So when you're ready to do the lining or the inside of the bag, you'll notice we're going to do something a little bit different. We're still going to start at the top and stitch and backstitch. We're going to go down along this side and turn. And I made 2 marks here at the bottom. This is a hole so that we can turn the bag inside out when we're all done, because it's all sewn inside out, and then in the end we flip it out through this hole down here. So you do want to leave an opening at the bottom. So you're basically going to do an L shape on this side. You're going to stop at the mark and backstitch. Then you're going to go up to this mark. We'll do some backstitching over here, and then you'll go up that side. So it's like 2 L's kind of facing each other. Okay, so again, place the fabric. Okay, my edges are slightly off, so I'm going to pull that together there. Okay, and then line up with the presser foot. take out that first pin, same thing, and back stitch. We have a pivot in the corner there. Go one more stitch on this side, so I'm going to go back again. One more stitch. Okay, and again, we're only going as far as the blue mark. To get to the blue mark, we can stop and do some back stitching. Okay, so we do the same back stitching here that we did at the beginning. Bring up the needle, bring up the presser foot, and pull the fabric out, cut it off. Threads go to the back again, and we start at the next blue mark, right here. Okay, so we're at the same blue mark here, the next one on the other side of the hole. Back stitch there to secure your opening. And we go to the next corner. Turn. Okay, so you should have both of your pieces sewn here. Okay, and again, the outside fabric, again, it's placed inside out. Okay, it's been inside out since the beginning, since we drew on it. Okay, so it never changed from that way. So we drew on the outside and then we sewed it. We drew on the back side of the fabric and then we sewed it from the back side. Okay, and the same thing with the lining fabric. The lining fabric is inside out and we sewed it inside out. Right sides together, okay? And the lining, you can't see from this side here, you can see better here. The lining has the hole here down at the bottom, and the main fabric does not have the hole. The other thing you want to notice is if your fabric is directional, okay? So this fabric is directional, it has cats. We don't want the cats upside down or sideways. Now they could be, it doesn't really matter, but if you care and you don't want them upside down, make sure you leave your opening at the top of the bag. Because this bag could also be made, I could have made the bag this way. I would have had to turn the cats the other direction. Then it would have been more of a horizontal rectangle, not a vertical rectangle. Okay, so next we're going to move on to doing the straps. Okay, so when I drew the straps, the fabric was also folded in half, so we ended up with two pieces like this. Okay, so we're going to make two separate straps. We do have two pieces of fabric, and we're going to make one at a time. And what we're going to do is we're going to fold it like this in half, so hot dog style, as some people say. So we're going to fold it in half like this, okay? So we're folding it with the good side in the inside. Okay, so you should be looking at the wrong side or the back side of the fabric. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to make sure that those edges line up with each other. Okay, so that's your job, to make sure those edges are not like that. Okay, we want to make sure that they are lined up right on top of each other. Okay, then what you can do is you can pin those edges together. So right along the side, you can pin those edges together. Now sometimes at the studio, we also just press our fabric in half like that. So if you have access to using an iron at home, and if your parents don't mind working with you with the iron, or if you're a little older and you're able to do it on your own, then you can definitely just take this, fold it in half, and iron it like that, and that's fine. The one thing you want to remember is that when you sew this, you want to sew the open edge, okay? See how we have a fold over here on this side? You want to sew the side that is open, not the side that's folded. So a lot of people make the mistake of sewing along this edge accidentally, but we're just going to sew this edge. You also do not need to sew either short end, okay? So both short ends stay open, just the one long end gets sewn shut. Okay, so this is the same seam allowance we did before, with edge of the presser foot for 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm gonna go ahead, line up with the edge, do my few stitches, and then back stitch. Okay, and then we're just gonna sew along that entire edge. And again, as you're sewing, just keep checking these edges here, okay, and making sure that they are lined up with each other. Even when you have pins there, sometimes you might think the edges are lined up, but then they roll away from each other. So keep checking that those edges are lined up. Okay, now if that happens, I don't know if you could see that or not, but when I backstitched there at the end, it kind of got bunched up at the end of the fabric. And that happened because I went like 1 stitch off the edge instead of slowing down at the end. So I went 1 stitch maybe too far off the edge, and when it went backwards, it kind of scrunched up a little bit. So if you keep sewing when that happens, if you keep trying to go backwards, it's just gonna get more and more stuck. So if that happens, just, that's enough backstitching, that's fine. Just bring the needle up in the air. Okay, and then lift up your presser foot. Okay, you'll take it out. And it might look a little bit like squished up at the corner, but because I didn't let it stay in there any longer than necessary, it's not that bad. But just always look out for that sort of thing. And we're gonna cut those tails off. Okay, you wanna make sure you cut your tails of thread off both ends of the fabric from where you began and where you end. And then you're gonna repeat that same process for the other strap. Okay, so once you've sewn the strap together here, you can see I've sewn along the edge there like that, right? And then you have a tube that you've created there. We're gonna wanna flip this around. Now, if you have a safety pin at home, okay, that is probably the easiest way to flip this around because both ends are open. If you don't have a safety pin, it is possible to take the end and to flip it. And then you kind of sit there and you pick out the inside. I actually can do it pretty quickly by putting my finger inside and pulling it inside out like that. But you might just have to sit there and kind of slowly pick it out like that, and that's fine. But if you can find a safety pin at home, what you're gonna do, you will take the end of the safety pin and you're going to, let's see here, hook it on to the end. Okay, just like that. You're gonna hook it onto one end like that, and then you can close the safety pin like that. Okay, so you open it like this, close it like that, and then you're gonna put the safety pin back. So see, it's only hooked to one side of the fabric. You can see that. Okay, and then we're gonna put it back inside, and then this is kind of like how we've done elastic on pajama pants or the drawstring cord on the backpack if you've done those projects. So you're just gonna put the safety pin back inside, and then the hardest part is getting it started. So if you need help with that, you can ask someone to help you. But you're gonna push the pin in, kind of slide the fabric up along the pin, and then you try to get that end kind of starting to flip. So tuck that end inside. See, so I'm trying to make the end go inside of itself here. Once you get that starting to go in there, like that, it makes it a lot easier. So then you kind of push and pull. So you slide fabric. So here's the safety pin. Let me show you that again. Here's the safety pin right there. It's, you can see that shape there. And then you push the fabric onto the safety pin, and then you slide it off over here. You kind of get the end off like that. Okay? And you push it through. And I hold the safety pin in this side. Okay, so right now the safety pin is right here where this finger is tapping, okay? And then I slide the fabric off the end, okay, like that, without letting go. You keep holding it here. Push it through, keep holding it here, and slide the fabric off. There comes the safety pin out, and then we pull this off. There we go. like that. Okay, I'll do that same process to turn the other strap right side out. And then what you're going to want to do is to, if you again have access to an iron, you can press this, and if you press it, you're going to want to try to get that seam there right along the edge like that and press it flat like a pancake, okay? Like that. I guess pancakes can be kind of puffy, but you're going to make it flat like this. And if you don't have an iron, you can just literally lay this on the table and just kind of rub it with your hand, do some finger pressing. We've done that before at the studio. Just kind of rub it with your hand, finger press it. The heat from your hand will also help to crease it, okay? Okay, so I've taken my straps and I have pressed them nice and flat, again, with the seam along the edge, okay? And then I'm going to take the outside of my bag, which is the cat fabric, and I'm going to flip it right side out. Okay. And then we are going to put the strap along the top edge. Okay. So you might be inclined to put the strap coming up like this, because that's how you would think that's going to look, right? So the strap should come up like that. But when you sew the strap onto the bag, you're actually going to want to have the strap coming down into the bag, like this, blocking your view there. Okay, so we actually want to have the strap edge lined up at the top of the bag. So the raw edges go together at the top of the bag, okay? So I'm going to lay my bag flat here on the table. I'm going to take my straps. Now, if you see the size of the strap here, we made a 4-inch wide strap, okay? And then we folded it in half, which would give us 2 inches. And then we sewed a 1/2 inch from the edge, which gives us 1.5 inches, okay? So you can see here, we have 1.5 inch wide strap. Now, if you wanted a skinny strap, you could do a smaller rectangle to start with, okay? But you have to always consider that you're gonna fold it in half and then you're gonna sew a bit in from the edge, you'll lose a little bit more. Okay, this is how we get a strap that's 1.5 inches wide. So then we put our straps up here at the top, like that, again, like that. And the strap placement is really gonna depend on the size of the bag. Now, I did not have a very large piece of fabric I was using, so the bag is not super wide. It's a little bit longer of a purse. You could probably put a nice book in there or a journal or something. So my straps are gonna stay closer to the outer edge of the bag, okay? But if you have a bag that is wider, okay, and it comes out further on the side, then the straps can come out further. Usually I don't suggest having the strap right up at the edge. Usually you wanna come in a little bit from the edge. So if it's a wider bag, I tend to do maybe 2 inches from the side of the bag. In this case, since we don't have a lot of space, I'm gonna try maybe, maybe 1 inch from the side. I'm gonna check it out, see how that feels. Okay, so I'm gonna measure from the seam to the beginning of the strap, get 1 inch, and I'm gonna put a pin there. And the same thing on the other side. I'm actually gonna use my 1 inch grid on my table to help me measure. Then another strap goes on the back side. Okay, now one thing you want to make sure is that when you place the strap down, you don't twist it, okay? So the same, if this side of the strap is touching the fabric, that same side of the strap should touch the fabric on the other side, okay? That can get a little confusing. Okay, so again, going 1 inch from the seam. And really the most important thing is that you just have an equal distance from the seam on each side. Okay, so like that. Now once it's sewn, the straps will actually flip up like this, okay? And you can kind of more visualize how the bag will function and if it seems good where the strap placement is. So I'm happy with the strap placement. So I'm gonna go ahead and change my pins to be ready for sewing. Turn them going in the up position. You don't have to do this, but it does prevent you from poking yourself quite so much. Okay, and then we're gonna go sew this. So I checked, and the bag is just big enough to fit around the free arm of the sewing machine where you take the accessory case off. But if you decide to make like a little teeny tiny bag, like a doll size bag, I'm just going to show you how you would sew it if you can't get it to go around the accessory case. So what you would do is you would just lay it up on top like this. Okay, and then you don't, let me show you a different view here. You don't take off the accessory case, and instead you would sew like that with the bag kind of up in the air, like this. Okay, now in my case it is big enough to fit around, so I'm just gonna take off the accessory case and show you that. Slide that off to the side. Okay, so if it's a really tight fit, don't do it this way, because in the end it'll just make it kind of difficult because it'll get stuck. Okay, and then we're still going to line up with the edge of the presser foot. Now what I would suggest, since if you take that pin out, there's a possibility that strap will just move. Okay, now you also notice here, if you can see here, that the straps are an equal distance from the seam. Okay, like this. Okay, and that's what you want. So what I would do is sew into the strap a little bit, okay, before you take the pin out. So get kind of super close to it and then take the pin out. Now, if you have a very large bag that you're making, you can actually just sew each top edge of the strap. You do not have to go all the way around. This is a very small bag, so it almost doesn't make sense to stop at the end of the strap. I'm just going to go all the way around. But again, you do not need to sew in between where the straps are. I'm just doing that because I'm doing a very small bag. So I wait till I've actually sewn on the blue fabric before I take the pin out. That way it can't move. And make sure the strap doesn't get crooked like this. So make sure it stays straight. Okay, now I already did that one, so I'm going to stop there. Okay, then we're ready to move on to the next step. Okay, so when you're ready, you're going to take your outside bag and your inside bag, and we're going to put them together. So what you want to do is you want to take your outside bag that has the straps on it, and you're going to flip it inside out. This is where it gets a little weird. Everyone always gets confused as to why you would do this. Okay, but we do want the straps hidden inside of the outer layer. Then you're going to take your lining bag, which is currently inside out, and we're going to flip it right side out. Okay, good side out. There is the hole from your opening there, like that, okay? Then you take this bag and you're going to put it inside of the other bag, okay? So they go inside each other like that. So the whole thing is inside out. Okay, so if we look at it from the outside, it's the wrong side of the fabric. If you look at it from the inside, it's also the wrong side of the fabric, okay? And the good sides face each other, okay? And the straps are, again, hidden inside, so you can't see the straps anymore, okay? If they are showing up here on the top, if they're hanging out, something is wrong. So we don't want to see the straps in there, and we don't want to see them anywhere, okay? So they're sandwiched in between the layers of fabric. Then the other thing you want to do is you want to take the seams that are at the side, so we have one seam here, and one seam there, okay? And we want to line them up together, okay? So I'm trying to line up those seams together from the layers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this seam go this way and the other seam go the other way. That just makes it a little less bulky when it's sewn together, okay? Lays a little more flat. Okay, so we're going to pin that side. Go to the other side and pin that together. And when you're doing this, the most important thing is you get those top edges to line up, okay? So we wouldn't want to pin it together like this. You want to make sure that the raw edges of the fabric go together all the way around. And the pins will help you keep it there. Now, when you're doing this, if you find, when you put these two together, that they really don't fit together, it's just due to some slightly improper cutting or sewing, and it happens, it's not a huge deal. You pretty much have two options. You can either take the side seam that you sewed, if one layer is a little too big, sew it a little smaller. If you find that your sewing was particularly really far in and you sewed a really big seam, you could seam rip it and give it some more room to make it fit. But if it's just a little bit off, worst case scenario, it's not the end of the world. You could just take the top edge and let it fold a little bit and have a little pleat. So don't stress about it. If you don't feel like seam ripping, not a big deal. This is supposed to be fun. But it is possible to fix it if you need to, just by adjusting along the side seam, okay? So now we have the whole top pinned together. We have the edges, the raw edges lined up at the top. Okay, and we're ready to sew in a circle. So we're gonna sew in a circle the same way we did before, putting it around the end of the accessory, the end of the free arm part. So we're gonna pull that accessory case off again and go around in a circle. And you can sew all the way around. It doesn't matter where you start because you're gonna circle all the way around. And this time you can backstitch. Okay, so I'm ready to sew around the top of the bag here. This is getting close to the end of the bag. And I already have a stitch line there from before when I sewed the straps on. So I'm pretty much just gonna sew on top of that same stitch line. I'm not gonna backstitch initially because when I get back to the end, I will overlap and backstitch at the end. Now the one thing that's important with this is because this is going around in a circle, you wanna make sure you always lift this part up. Don't let it get caught and stuck underneath the machine where it's getting really tight here. Make sure you give it some slack there. So keep circling it around. Now the other thing I'm making sure that I'm doing, which you may not be able to see, is I'm making sure that my stitches are a little below the stitches from before so that I don't see these stitches in the end. Okay, so if that matters to you, make sure you sew below the stitches, or you can plan to seam rip them if they're visible. Okay, we're back around to where I started. So I'm going to overlap a little bit and then backstitch. Okay, then we're ready to turn it inside out. Okay, so I've sewn all the way around the top of the bag, and now I'm going to turn it inside out. So do you remember that hole that you had in your lining fabric? Down here at the bottom. You have those marks there from that hole we left, okay? We're going to turn it out from that hole. Now what you can do first is you can take your scissors and you can clip your corners like this. Okay, so we're taking some fabric off the corner, but we're not cutting the stitching there, okay? This will just make the corners a little less bulky so that when we turn it around, we can make a little more pointy corners. But you don't want to cut too close to the stitching because it is a bag. You don't want it to be weak and fall apart. In fact, if you don't do this step, it's not a big deal for a bag, especially if your fabric is a lightweight cotton like this. It's not very heavy fabric. Okay, so then we start flipping it out through this hole here. So there's the straps coming out. Starts to look kind of funny, like two bags going opposite directions. Okay, now with that hole down at the bottom there, we can put our hand in there, or our fingers in there, and push the corners out. So those corners that I just clipped, I am poking out. So there'll be two corners there. Same thing at the bottom of the lining fabric. There are two corners here that we want to poke out. Okay. Now, if you have something handy at home, like the stick we use here, you could have a chopstick. You could use the eraser end of a pencil. Don't use the pointy end. And you can use that also to help you push out the corners if you're having trouble getting your hand in there, or if you just can't poke it out enough. Push out those corners like that. Okay, now what we need to do is we need to sew the hole shut at the bottom. Okay, so we're going to go do that. I am going to just make sure that these edges up here at the top are nicely lined up. Okay, so we want to make sure that the raw edge of the fabric is tucked inside. You don't want to sew it like this with the raw edge sticking up and all the threads sticking out. Okay, make sure that's tucked inside so it looks nice and flat and even. And then when you sew it, you want to sew nice and close to the edge. So you could press this with an iron, or you could just again finger press it before you go to sew it. Okay, so I'm ready to sew that hole shut, and I am just going to line up my needle. This time, instead of putting the presser foot down along the edge like this, the problem with that is my needle is going to be too far from the edge. I want the needle right along the edge. So I'm going to go like that. I'm going to make sure I know where the hole is. So you can mark it with pins. Put the needle in there, lower the presser foot. Now you don't have to sew all the way across the bottom, we just need to sew where the hole is. And we do want a back stitch. Okay, and then I'm sewing as far as here. Make sure those edges are lined up. Okay, and then we'll back stitch there. Okay, at this point, the bag is essentially done, but there is one additional step that makes it look nice, and that's pressing and a top stitch at the top. So I will show you that next. Okay, so we're going to take the lining part of the bag, the polka dots, we're going to put it inside. You just push that inside it like that. Okay, so essentially at this point our bag is done, but it will look a lot nicer if we give the top a nice press to make it nice and crisp and flat. And then we're going to do a top stitch around the top on the sewing machine to keep it flat like that when you're using it. Okay? Okay, so when we press it, we want to make sure that the edges, the seams up here, are even. Okay, we want to make sure the strap is pulled all the way down there, pulled all the way up and out. Okay, and that it's nice and flat and even at the top. And then we're going to give a little press there. And then we're going to rotate it around. Now, if your bag is large enough, you can put it around the end of the ironing board. If the bag is really, really tiny, I wouldn't even bother ironing it. I would just finger press it. Now, if you find you're not ironing it, because you don't have an iron easily to use at home, which is fine, what you can do, and I would suggest doing this anyway, is take some pins and you can pin the top edge so that it's staying nice and flat the way that you want it. So even if you press it, it's good to pin it at the top And that just keeps the lining from rolling up and out where you don't want it to be. Okay, and then we're going to sew around the top of the bag and we will be done. Okay, last time going around the top of the bag here. Now this stitch is called a top stitch. It's done on the top side. You can see it. So it does matter a little bit more how straight it is. You could do something fun like a zigzag or something if you have something fun on your machine, but sometimes if you make the stitch too heavy of a stitch, like if you happen to have decorative stitches, you just have to be careful that it doesn't get stuck going around because it might be a little bit thick sometimes. Okay, so I'm just going to stick with the normal straight stitch, and I am going to think about where I start sewing, because wherever I start sewing I'm going to have back stitching and I don't want that to be right in the front of the bag and noticeable. So I'm going to start over here near the seam, near the side of the bag where it will be less noticeable. I'm just going to line up with the edge of the presser foot so that I sew a 1/2 inch away. And again, you could sew 1/4 inch away, 1/8 of an inch away. It doesn't really matter where the needle position is, whatever you like. Just make sure that the lining underneath is staying flat. So if you feel it bumpy under there, you want to smooth it out. You also want to make sure the strap stays up and out of the way. It doesn't fold down on you like this when you're sewing it. So you don't want to, a lot of people accidentally fold it down this way and sew across it, but you do want to keep it up to the right like this. If you accidentally catch it going down, just seam rip it and try it again, making sure it's going up. Okay, so I've gone back to where I started, so I'm going to backstitch. I overlapped it, I'm going to backstitch and come forward just to make sure it's nice and secure. Needle up. Okay, we want to make sure we get all these threads cut off of here. Don't want to leave a mess on there. And let's take a look at our bag. So, and just like that, your bag is complete. This is a great little kid-sized bag. I can see my kids will probably enjoy this, putting a stuffed animal or two inside of there. And just think of this time at home now when you have a chance to do some sewing. It's a great opportunity to do a little sewing on your own and get independent in it while still getting a little bit of help, but doing it on your own. And you can use this time to make gifts for people, for friends and family. Make gifts even if it's not going to be given for a while, that's okay. And I hope you enjoy yourself, but there will be more videos to come. This is just the first one. So I'm hoping to make a couple more that you can do. And again, you can make bags in all different sizes. So get sewing, do a big bag, do a small bag. And I hope that your parents will share the pictures with me. I would love to share them with people. But I would love to see them myself. I'd love to see what you're doing while you're home on this break.